Welcome to this series of videos. We are going to revisit some of the theoretical frameworks that Bill Cope and I have developed with others over many decades. We're going to look at the concept of multiliteracies, also the concept of learning by design. Of course, both of these are relevant to education in the digital age and for making meaning. Just to establish the context, the Multiliteracies project, which was initiated in 1994, which is about 24 years ago now, was an endeavour of bringing people in the field who were concerned about literacy and meaning making, bring them together to try and reflect on the fact that despite all the work that we were doing, despite all our CVs and all our research, the gap between those who were performing in formal educational settings and those who weren't performing was getting bigger. So we had some resources from our Australian projects, and we brought a group of people together at a place called New London in New Hampshire in the United States to talk about what makes a difference and how did we have to understand the learner of the future and the learning that was appropriate. We ended up publishing an article in the Harvard Ed Review, which became a manifesto for the Multiliteracies project. But essentially, what it was about was the following. First, that learning, all learning, needs to be about design. And meaning making is also a matter of design. So it's not enough to be learning grammars or routines. It's considering the way in which learning experiences are designed in order to have particular effects. The second point is that that kind of activity always involves a social purpose. It's not just about filling in time. It's not just about getting through the curriculum. It's about transforming others, transforming people as learners, transforming them as workers, and transforming them as citizens. That always goes together in the context of any learning experience, whether we're explicit about it or whether it's implied in the sort of designs that we put together. We have discovered over the many years in which we've worked with collaborators and have done research that there are three things that we believe make a difference in transforming learners, and these are the following. First is the context, what we call diversity, the context that people bring with them into the learning environment, their backgrounds, their sense of identity, their socioeconomic background, a whole range of factors makes an important difference. And every educator needs to address that diversity. There is no curriculum, no pedagogy that is a one-size-fits-all. So diversity, its recognition and harnessing for productive purposes is one of the factors that makes a difference in transforming learners. The second one, we believe, and increasingly is the case, is that learners make meaning across disciplines in different modes and in different languages and in different dialects. So understanding multimodality, multiliteracies, it has become increasingly more important, the way in which meaning is made across different modes and how we harness the modes that new technology affords us. And thirdly, and equally importantly, perhaps even more so, is the word pedagogy. And that is about the purposeful choices any educator makes in any subject area. These choices have to be particular to the subject, they have to be particular to the goals, they have to be particular to the individuals, they have to be particular to the group. It's not just about instructional sequences that fill in time or cover an area. It's understanding the way in which you engage with learners and that learners are transformed along the way. So these three dimensions are the ones that I'm going to elaborate on next. Diversity, multimodality, and pedagogy.
So we came up with this word multiliteracy. If you do a Google search now, you'll find lots and lots of mentions of this word, but there we were. We thought we'd invent a word, really to contrast what we were doing with literacy in the singular. So what literacy in the singular meant historically was learning the standard form of a national language. All the kids were coming to school. We were going to teach them to read and write correctly. We're going to teach them maybe get rid of various registers and accents, a standard form of the language, which is what we did in nation states, where we wanted people to be fundamentally the same. One of the functions of the modern state was to make people the same, and school provided a kind of a vehicle to do that, and one of the tools was this thing called literacy in the singular. And what you did is you learned a whole lot of rules. You learned how to spell, you learned grammatical rules, what's good grammar and what's bad grammar, but also you learned the high canonical forms of the language by the time you got to study something called literature. So this is what literacy historically meant. And what we wanted to do with the word multiliteracies was to build a kind of a counterpoint, to build an alternative. And we had two kinds of intentions. One was multi around culture and differences between human beings, and the other was multi around multimodality. Let me talk about each of those two aspects of multi. The first one was the fact that, in fact, kids come to school with all sorts of dialects. Kids come to school speaking other languages. This is a multilingual world, increasingly in a world of extraordinary migrations. So, to say that we were just going to do literacy and to write over all those differences was both an ethical problem, but also a pedagogical problem. But our view of literacy in the plural was that it wasn't just other languages being ignored. It wasn't just other dialects being ignored, but it was also different registers, different discourses. So, when you go to a doctor, there are actually two different discourses going on. One is the professional discourse of medicine, and the other is the discourse with which us ordinary mortals speak about health. And there's a kind of, if you like, a cross-cultural thing going on there, in the sense that our perspectives on the world, our knowledge of the world, our understanding of the world is based, if you like, on two different ways of speaking, two different forms of discourse, even in a doctor-patient relationship. And in a world where there are these incredible specialisms, people going off on tangents, a whole lot of subcultural variety. In fact, what we do in our everyday lives is not speak the same talk the same talk, speak the same speech. It isn't that. It's actually dealing with differences, trying to understand the other person, whose way of speaking, ways of understanding the world, ways of knowing the world, ways of interpreting the world, which might be professional, they might be technical, they might be just simply one's life experience. These are differences. So what we end up dealing with all the time is, in fact, discursive differences, right? And Courtney Kasdan, who was one of our group, pointed us to this whole tradition of what's called contrastive linguistics. Instead of linguistics as a generic thing, the language we all speak, what are the differences and how do we negotiate those differences in our everyday lives? So that was the first aspect of multi. The second one was, and look, we started thinking this through. We met in 1994. The Harvard Ed Review piece was published in 1996. The World Wide Web happened in 1993, but not many people knew about it the day it happened. Facebook didn't happen till the turn of the century. But what we already saw was a phenomenon, a textual phenomenon, which we called multimodality. Rarely anymore does text exist by itself. Yeah, it does in novels, perhaps. There are not many places, though, where text still exists by itself. If you take magazines, you take television, the first wave of television, it was really almost entirely visual. But now if you watch a sports channel or you watch a business channel, it's this crazy mix of images overlaid with text. The web is just image and text on top of each other. And a kind of an interesting radical thing that happened with digitization, which is the capacity in the same technology to create image and sound and text, all of the same stuff. So in fact, we were just on the cusp of this coming of radical multimodality, which was facilitated by digital technologies. So we theorized that, and we said there are a number of different modes which we have to think about in conjunction, which is image beside text, and also beside space, and also beside embodiment, which is, here we are doing a video recording and you're looking at our hands and our movements and our bodies, and also with sound. So all of these things were coming together. So we built this theory of the multimodality of contemporary literacies, where when we just do grammar in sentences and literature in novels, we're leaving out the reality of contemporary communication. So this is what motivated us to create this word multiliteracies as a counterpoint to the historical notion of literacy in the singular.